Let's wait a minute or two to see if other people come up to our hot takes and welcome Dengel. I'm not even sure who Dengel is, but assuming that's one of our DIF members who's come to hear the hot takes about the Neo-Cypherpunk Summit.
Yeah, hi. That's true. And I'm calling in from Malta. So thanks for having an appropriate time for this call.
We have most of our working group calls are in the evenings in Europe and mornings in the US, but Kyle is neither in Europe nor the US.
I'm floating in the ocean in between.
Let me see if we can get Juan in here. Because Juan wasn't really there. He just like dropped in for lunch because he lives not far. But let's see, he might have questions for us. And yeah. So we went to the Neo-Cypherpunk Summit. I actually have, oh, DIF. Juan is now DIF. I bought the little book on like the politics of privacy that they had, mostly because I always want to give a donation. So I always try to like get some swag, like a t-shirt or a book or anything like that. Did you take anything home? Or did you get too much swag at DAppCon?
I did manage to get a copy of the book as well. And I was just actually reading it today. There were some interesting takes in there. Some actually pertaining to digital identity and kind of how it relates to building like sovereign nations and stuff like that. I believe it was in Audrey. No, it wasn't in Audrey Tang's. It was the one right after it. I can't remember who the author was.
Okay, cool. Yeah, maybe I'll read that on the train tomorrow on my way to DWeb camp, which is the next thing up.
Nice.
So the hot takes is just kind of a conversation between us, like our biggest takeaways. If we disagree with each other, then it gets hotter. Like that's the hot part. And then whoever's joined can ask us questions at any time. Just feel free to either raise your hand or butt in. These are small groups, and then we publish it to our YouTube channel. So that's how this works. The hot takes is also a hot seat, says Diff.
Alrighty.
I don't know. Is you're going through another heat wave? It seems much cooler here now than it was, so my seat is not too bad.
Middle of winter and we've got rain here, so.
Yeah. I mean, my main thing was I was so impressed as usual with how many people were there. I mean, the place was packed. It was packed. Yes. The signage was great. The people were the right people. I think that's the biggest thing about the Web3 Summit for the Web3 Neo-Cypherpunk or Web3 Privacy Now people is that the right people are there. You get there and it's like, oh yeah, these are my people who actually care about human rights and freedom and privacy. And there are different levels of technical ability and different levels of implementation. Like not everybody is using a graphene or anything, but everybody cares about it. And I think that's what is the biggest thing for me is you always kind of meet the right people there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's one of those things too where like you'll meet the entire spectrum of people, and like that's kind of one of the things that they're very good about is that like recognizing that everybody contributes through a different set of like opinions and different sorts of capabilities that they have. Like I believe it was Mario, if I'm remembering correctly, who was doing LibreBoot. So I don't know if you guys have ever done this before, but it's essentially where you open up a laptop and you flash the BIOS or the bootloader itself by sticking an extra chip on it, so that you have an open source bootloader, because you need to actually get to the physical hardware layer in order to manipulate it. Or at least that's how I had to do it in 2018 when I experimented with it. But it's like, that's one side of the spectrum. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have like academia who are doing like research on human rights and the actual impacts of the technologies when you have something as like open and like free as a technology as that.
Yeah, and everything in between. I think it also
Yes.
brings together, because it was during Berlin Blockchain Week, but it brings together people who are blockchain people and not blockchain people, and that whole spectrum of everything to what I call it's kind of like an Acapulco kind of thing. It's like everything from the free drugs people to the free guns people.
Yep.
So it's like all the way left and all the way right. Um, if those categories even mean anything, but it's just like,
Yep.
hey, this is, I want my autonomy as a human being, and I want my freedom to associate as a human being, and
Yes. I
yeah,
was thinking the same thing, Juan.
yeah, horseshoe theory, but for tech sovereignty, yeah. So, what were some of the sessions? It's funny because you were saying how you weren't feeling really well that week. That particular day, I wasn't feeling great. I must have eaten something wrong. And so every time I sat down in a lecture, I fell asleep. It was so rude. And it wasn't for lack of sleep. I apparently was just not right. So I went to quite a few talks, but I remember very few of them. What were some of the highlights for you in terms of the talks that you heard?
Yeah, I didn't get to as many either. I'm a natural butterfly when it comes to these conferences. I find myself in the hallways more than I find myself in the conference room. But I do remember attending one with Polar and somebody from DarkFi. And they were talking quite a bit about kind of the impact of like technology. And I remember at one point they were making a relational case between the Irish and the technology, and kind of like the liberating factor between the two, and like how the government of Ireland has kind of established its sovereignty and how that's having an impact on the technology itself. The talk is recorded. I would definitely recommend people go watch that one because it was very cool how they were connecting the two ideas together. Um, Another good one was Cade. Um, Cade has spent some time working on Signal at one point in time, and he was one of the largest proponents against um, uh, using phone numbers as a mechanism to build the identity system of Signal. Um, and so essentially he was giving a talk on the impacts of that years down the road when he was originally proposing it to Moxie when they were first designing the system. So that one is also a very interesting talk that I think would be relevant to people here at DIF.
Yeah. What was what was the first one called? Let's see. Did you remember? Or we can take a look at that. Maybe we'll look them in. We'll put them in the show notes when
Yes.
we finish. We'll put like all of the because I don't think Kate's was recorded. I also found that one. I did not fall asleep during that one because by that time he started out. It was funny because it was started out like these are my personal stories, and I was like on my way walking out of the room, and then when he started talking, and I didn't know him. Juan knows him. And when he started talking, I stopped walking out of the room. And then I was standing up for the whole talk so I didn't fall asleep.
Yep.
So, but yeah, and they put out a huge report on digital identity, which I haven't finished reading yet, but I at least started. Oh, look at that. Juan has the talk here in the
Yep.
show notes already. But yeah, that one was really fascinating. And it does scan that whole I think this is one of the biggest things that we talk about here in at DIF is really you think you're making these little choices because you can use DIDs in a centralized way.
Yes.
The Chinese government uses DIDs all the time. Does that mean it's a decentralized privacy preserving system? I'm I'm not sure, right? What's under the hood? And then you can use OAuth in a privacy preserving way. And so it's really 20 different decisions that you make along the way that are tiny decisions, as you mentioned with Signal. If you use your phone number as your identifier, that ties you right into being able to be identified, whatever
Yeah.
we're calling linkable identity data, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
there's probably 100 ways to configure it so there's linkable identity data. Just
Yes.
simple things like, which type of VC you use, and you get is it linkable, not linkable? And so there's all these tiny design decisions. Because I have people say to me like, oh, well, if we use DIDs, are we good? And it's like, no, that's,
Yep.
but yeah.
I like to think of these sorts of properties when we're taking a principle and trying to apply it to a technological like design choice. I think of them as kind of like an emergent principle. Um, so the way I like to think about this is like you can't just do one thing for privacy and call it good. The threat model is constantly changing. It's a cat and mouse game. And rarely can you build privacy backwards. So once you have an unprivate system, it's very difficult to add it back on. The one case where I've actually seen it work was with the Find My feature in Apple, where they were able to completely re-architect the system and redesign it. But the only reason that was possible for them is because they controlled the entire stack. It's not an open system, and they had a very interesting property of such a widely deployed system that they could essentially deploy a mesh net inside of iPhones that would act as locators for it. But outside of something like that, privacy is one of those things where it emerges from each individual property and decision point that you make. And sometimes you have to make trade offs. And that's an example with Signal of one of the sorts of trade offs you have to do. The fact that they use a phone number probably reduces the amount of spam that exists and the amount of like scam messages that you'll get through Signal because of that. And so it acts as an anti-fraud mechanism for them that's effective in the same way that like KYC was an effective deterrent for anti-fraud for us with our BAT token system. It's not something that we wanted, but it was something that we had to accept because of the trade-offs. Because the trade-off we were making was, do we accept the fraud in the system, or do we find some sort of balanced identity system to be able to negate some of the privacy guarantees, but do it in such a way that we're not having to collect the data and the user gets to choose where they're placing their data was kind of the trade-off of how we approach that.
Yeah, I mean, I actually remember somebody talking about like staking on Twitter, like the idea that in order to have a Twitter account, you don't have to pay for it, or like Blue Sky, but you have to stake a little bit of crypto. And if you're found to be a scammer, you lose your crypto. It could be $10, but that's enough. Like that $10 is enough to get rid of bots, because every time you create another fake account, you stake another $10. And as soon as it gets knocked off, you lose your $10. It's like those kinds of weird token trade-offs. Of course, nobody ever did that, but it's kind of an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
Twitter's actually got the opposite problem if you look at it these days with their creators program. They're now incentivizing bots to come on and copy content and then to steal content from other creators in order to try and make money through the system. And so they're having to deal with a very interesting problem because of the design choices they've made to try and incentivize more content creation. So it is just, as I like to call it, it's the sea of trade-offs. You just have to navigate it.
I would say that that's not unintentional. Like we have our trusted AI agents working group and our content assertions working group, creator assertions working group. But if you look at some of the discussions about AI and content and some of the billionaire conversations, they are in this direction of we're not going to need people and we're just going to make money off the bots the way that we made money off the people. So it's more like, okay, well, if we've got AI agents selling each other's things and we're getting a percentage, like you were saying with Twitter, like we're getting some percentage of that, of the advertising revenue that comes in from bots advertising to other bots. Like, what do we care if there's a person in the loop or not? The advertiser's still showing advertising. The bots are still buying things from one another. And that's like an economic reality. And then Twitter makes money, and it's kind of insane. What percentage of EVM traffic is humans transacting with humans? Yeah, I mean,
There's no way to know.
yeah, there's no way to know, but I saw something saying like 60% of internet traffic now is agentic, And that's not counting all the content that is agent, that is slop and that is not agentic traffic, but is slop that a human produced. And it's a weird
Most
world.
from Brave's perspective, we actually encounter this. Most agentic traffic you won't see because it's just requests made by a Claude Code instance. So whenever Claude Code is, for example, it depends on which model you use, but like GLM 5.2 is a great example of this. It prefers to use the web fetch tool. And the web fetch tool will essentially just, it's kind of like curl, but it's a wrap around it to go make requests to the page. And you'll see that because of the way that web fetch works, it will hit a lot of 403s and a lot of authorization capabilities with it. And so from the server's perspective, what they're seeing, the number of requests that they're seeing, it's just a spam load that's occurring because of that. And so yeah, it's we're already seeing these sorts of things today within our system, and like it's trade-offs that you have to make with these sorts of things too, of like what's the right way to navigate it. Is the answer only human navigation, or is it less?
Yeah, cool. So back to the Neo-Cypherpunk.
Yes.
Did you? Yeah, I don't know. I also went to like a couple of sessions with the bread guys, which is where like we also saw them at that picnic, which was interesting. Like I didn't, they weren't in the privacy neo-cypherpunk space really. They were much more in the regenerative and like when crypto, they can call them crypto socialist, so crypto movement. And that was interesting. Bread chain, yeah, bread chain people. So they had their own room and it was like a side room where they were talking about all these different projects. And that was, like I said, it was interesting because it's kind of privacy adjacent. But it was a full day of sessions about social good. They had stuff about what's going on in Latin America, some of the projects that they're funding, and how to create this. Basically, they're trying to create an alternative economy, which to me doesn't really look like an alternative economy. Like, I really like the people, but it's sort of, I don't know. The thing that I didn't like about it is I love the people. They're doing good work. They've raised whatever $50,000 that they've distributed to all these places all over the world just through their TVL, like not through their actual locked amount. So they've got quite a bit of money locked in their chain.
Mhm.
But what I didn't like about it is that it has that same ring to it, like banking the unbanked, right? And it, like whenever you talk about banking the unbanked, you're talking about the opposite of privacy. You're talking about some tribe out there that has a sustenance economy and they're kind of fine until you tell them, oh, you could make a lot more money if you planted some monoculture crop that that isn't native to your country, and we're going to put you, you're banking on your phone, and then you're going to make more money. And I felt like that bread chain guys they don't say it in the same way, but it is the same trajectory. Like, we're going to help you, we're going to bring money to people who have less money. And I always am really worried about that. That's the opposite of privacy. That if you've got your sustenance economy and you're off the banking system, like nobody knows about you, you're okay.
Well,
Yep.
I'm not
It's
sure that that's their actual primary goal. I mean, they're it to me, I think they've ended up focusing primarily on capacity building and coming up with ways that worker owned legal entities or unregistered legal entities could work together. I mean, I think in cooperative circles and in worker owned economics, one of the biggest problems is creating network effects and sort of reaching minimum viability anywhere in the economy for a cooperative business. So before you can tell everyone, hey, you should workers should own all companies, all collectives should be owned by the people doing the work, not by an extractive ownership class. You can't really preach that message until it's viable everywhere, and it's not viable everywhere until there's a co-op at every low infrastructural layer in the economic stack below where you're trying to tell people to do worker ownership. So I think that their primary short-term goal is just having like a worker-owned network and having a worker-owned um, just like, it's sort of MVP, right? It's getting to a point where you don't need to borrow VC to do something in Web3, and it's sort of an unsexy goal because it's a little unsexy to people who are more radical, because the short-term goal is like be able to do work without having a boss, and everyone's like, oh, but I want to get rid of my boss so that I don't have work. But I think it's, it's it won't look like it has a chance until it meets that short-term goal and moves on to the funner stuff. Like it'll look hopeless until they accomplish it, and then retroactively it'll be like, oh, that took longer than I thought. But I do think this is just a common problem of the co-op movement. And it's like a lot of the MetaGov work, and like Tara Merck at MetaGov is also looking at this sort of invisibilized financialization, where all of Web3 is just a gig economy with VC capital. So all talk of companies and DAOs and organizational innovation is sort of dishonest, because no one is naming the basic conditions, which are VC goes in one end and like software comes out the other, and in between no one has healthcare. So I think like it's, yeah, I have the opposite take. I'm very optimistic for Breadchain, and I think the fact that they're sticking to their guns and trying after all this time to do unsexy, unpopular work is probably an index of them eventually succeeding. It's a hard road getting Web3 people to think in terms of everyone who does work is equally owed dignity. Like there's a very meritocratic sink or swim libertarianism in the basic business conditions that you can't like convert people out of. It's just the air people breathe. I don't know. Kyle, I cut you off.
Yeah, we disagree. That's great. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, I would disagree as well. I went and I looked at it after. They use all the same tools. They just have different intentions. And so from a technology perspective, it's just about where are they allocating capital, not how are they collecting it. And so like from a collection perspective, they're doing the exact same thing as every other incentive model. The only difference is they're not looking at it from a perspective of how do we maximize profit. They're looking at it from a how do we maximize status. It's because that's essentially where it works. But the problem is that a system like that doesn't typically scale. It works well in small communities where everybody knows each other, but online, that it's very hard. And like that's kind of the difficulty that I think they will continue to be faced with, is like the scale is their enemy in that regard. And like if you're talking about means of production and designing a system in such a way, but you're doing it in such a way that I've never met the person before, we're just collectively agreeing how to do this through economics. The design of economics, and at least in our current like theory, is that everything is optimized based around profits, and you maximize number go up factor. Before we had Milton Friedman's shareholder theory, there were alternative ways that we did this, and we've tried it many times before, and in many different sorts of variations. And that's what I see that they're doing is they're attempting the same intentions as what we've done before, but they're utilizing different tools.
It overlaps with the what's it called, the solidarity economy. And this year, one of the events I'm going to is at the Eco Village Network, and actually Jason Naredi, I think is his last name, is going to be speaking about that on the main stage at the Eco Village Network. So it's a very similar model. Maybe I should introduce those guys to each other. And the solidarity economy has really a lot of expansion across Europe. So that might be like a very good overlap. Cool. I'm wondering
It's
if Jill has any questions before because we're kind of getting down to the bottom of the hour. I could stay a few extra minutes, but not too much.
Questions? I mean, yeah, I guess I didn't
Or
expect this
comments.
conversation to take this direction, so I'm just happy to keep on listening.
We didn't expect it
um
to take this direction either, but that's where it went.
yeah. The
Yeah.
I think what's interesting to highlight is a point that I made during one of my talks as well. We were talking about decentralization, and Juan uh, and I were talking about this a while ago, and Bingo as well. This would have been probably about a year ago about how do you design like better social systems, and Bingo pointed me in a direction of Fair Share Social. And so I've also started like exploring this concept of like what happens with network design. And so we started talking about decentralization, and like where are we lying to ourselves? Um, One of the things that I've realized is that from a network theory perspective, centralization is one of those emergent properties. It's just kind of like the default state of what happens with any sort of like scale-free network. And so this is one of the things that I've called out with this is that like capital is a scale-free network, and capital is built on top of all these technologies. So what's likely to happen is that sure, we've got a decentralized system today, but over time, you're going to have the things like Paradigm or Stripe or JP Morgan Chase who are heavily incentivized to go hire a team to build a node and push downwards because they get legitimate hard power at the protocol layer. Um, and in such a way they will have the ability to have stronger incentives. If you look at like Google, for example, that's essentially what they've already done as well. And this is the thing that I pointed out about like how decentralization was captured on the web. Google started by building a free product. They built search, but then they also had an ad network on top that did such a good job of funding things that they could go and build Chrome. They could go and build an operating system. And basically, the whole point of all of these softwares is to funnel people into seeing more ads. So they've got 3.5 billion people because they selected three defaults. They selected what your operating system is on your hardware, they selected what your default browser is, and they selected what your default search engine is. And all of those equal more traffic to more ads.
Yep. And you're saying capital, like money, monetary capital. And monetary capital is designed in a certain way that disadvantages most of humanity. So if you're a young working age male, you're at an advantage. If you're everybody else, like if you're a child, if you're a grandmother, if you're female, you are disadvantaged by the way that monetary capital is structured. And I call that if your economy thinks of a woman breastfeeding a child as two free riders, then you've got it backwards what society is about, right? Like society is about having a society, which means having children. And so all of monetary systems are designed in this way, which is anti-humane and anti-human, and not to mention anti-nature. And so the centralizing function that you're talking about will happen even without technology around the people who do the things that are randomly considered the productive societal functions. The idea that people produce food is just kind of funny if you just, look at a tree that's growing apples, right? And it's like, well, I get to sell the apples because it's all, like, yeah, Juan is going to
I
say
have the
something,
piece
but
of
yeah,
paper. I have the piece of
yeah,
paper that says I own the land that the tree is using to make the apples.
yeah, that's
Um,
right. Yeah. I watered the
I
But
tree with water that came out of the sky.
it's yeah. I mean, I think fair share. There've been a lot of economists that have tried to show less easily co-opted or less easily financialized forms of exchange. And what a lot of them, I mean, to oversimplify, if you zoom out a little, most of the ways that you create local resistance or local autonomy, because it's like I think the vertical metaphor of a stack can be a little deceptive because capital isn't just above the protocol, it's also below the protocol. Because to run a protocol, you need to buy or rent servers that need to be bought with money. Like it's such a capital intensive thing to spin up a quote unquote decentralized protocol. So you have a bunch of people who put in money in advance to buy the hardware and build the software and install the software on the hardware and then run it. So then more money can flood into the system and call itself decentralized for a while the people who paid for the decentralization get outsized benefits. And like to me, the cardinal sin of Web3 or the original sin of Web3 is that everything is basically dollarized and in denial of dollarization. So every cryptocurrency can be exchanged for dollars at any time by any holder. And we pretend that's not the case. We have this whole fiction about on ramps and off ramps, but basically it's all just dollar proxies. It's all just Amazon gift cards. And the exchange rate might be variable, but the access to exchange is permanent and universal. So as long as what you are trading is tradable, it can be turned back into dollars at any time, you're just trading dollars. It's all just a branch of the dollar economy that has some whole decentralization narrative about it. But it took dollars to design the protocols. It takes dollars to spin up the networks. Everyone uses dollars to buy the tokens that they trade and speculate on and grow and then cash back out as dollars and then go back to their dollar-based lives. Like I see no point at which crypto has done anything but strengthen the dollar vis-a-vis other sovereign currencies, and all the while LARPing that it's going to bring down fiat, blah, blah, blah. Like the dollar is happy with all of this. The dollar wins no matter what everyone says. That's
I
been
would
my
disagree
take.
with that.
Try me.
Hot take, hot take.
Yeah. The reason I would disagree is because money at its basic unit of exchange is dependent upon acceptance. What we're doing is we're adding a derivative function of the ability to be able to swap in and out of currency far easier. So if you think about it from the perspective, I could keep all of my money inside of stocks today and then in real time swap it into whichever currency the person wants paid in. Whether or not that currency is they want paid in apples or goats or they want paid in US dollars because that's what they trust. And so it's one of those things where like this is what I find interesting is that like we're bringing the central banks on chain, but like in a way we're actually capturing them because they have to accept that they can't set the rules for swapping policy anymore. And so like this is essentially what the euro did too, is that they said we're universally going to come together and collectively agree that everybody should accept it, and then it created the network effect of the euro within the European Union. The only reason USDC and USDT exists as the leader today is because they were the first ones. Most money operates as a monetary policy or as a network effect, and the network effect compounds on an exponential rate. And so this is why, like, we were talking about, you know, the economics and the impact of people, but like the scale-free network problem is actually a derivative below that. It's actually just math. When you're dealing with an exponential function, it's just how it works. And so, like, if your system is designed in such a way that you're operating in percentage basis of growth, unless it's like sub 1%, it's mathematically just going to prefer whoever has money. There is no attribution of who has the money or the identity characteristics or attributes of who that person is. Sure, there's aspects that preferentially treat those things and determine the rules of what preferential attachment should occur, but naturally money is just going to exist in such a way. And so the reason I disagree with you on that one is particularly just because when you bring more capital on chain and then allow for the ability to swap in and out of it, it's going to change the game completely, because no longer is it about the strength of a single currency. It's rather about the strength of being able to swap into any particular currency.
But
Well,
but that still helps the dollar. Like being able to swap in and out of
meanwhile,
all currencies equally benefits the dollar and disadvantages everyone else. Like
while the
it hurts
dollar is
everyone except the
dominant.
dollar more. Exactly. Like since all of this started within a dollar-based globalization with the euro dollar and the petrodollar effectively making more than 51% of the world's economy dollar denominated, lowering the barrier for entry hurts everyone except the dollar more than the dollar, including the euro technically and the Saudi dinar, but whatever. um,
Yeah.
that
Well,
that actually is completely my point. Is that it is an accelerant of everyone else's defenses getting worn down, or rather, every other sovereign currency.
well,
Or
I
is it
want
a
to.
yeah,
Yeah.
I assume you
I
probably
want
want to
to I
follow
want
up.
to make one comment about what I think the cardinal sin is, and we're seeing it in real time. The cardinal sin is like not paying attention to that first thing that Juan said, which is your physical infrastructure. I mean, how much of the blockchain runs on AWS, right? Half of it at least. And then, you know, and then you're completely dependent on the existing economy. You don't have your own electricity, you don't have your own anything. And so, like, what we're talking about right now is monetary, like what's happening on the monetary level. And that's where I think Bread Chain actually does have an advantage, because they're talking about the actual land level, like who is actually producing a real thing. And that's where I think we're already seeing the collapse of that. We're seeing tremendous like moves of physical gold in the last few weeks. It's just fantastic because nobody wants to take money anymore. So the physical resources, I think, is where the cardinal sin of blockchain is having absolutely zero ownership of anything. And that's where I thought Web3 privacy, and also we went to this other, like, what was it called, event, Logos or something, where they're talking about the physical hardware. And I think increasingly being able to repurpose existing hardware, which is where Kyle started this, that's going to be really essential in the coming days. It's going to be in the coming years. It's going to be harder and harder to acquire these things in certain countries. And I think that the Web3 privacy people, like you said, like since they span this whole spectrum of everything from, let's reset your hardware all the way up to let's think about the social fabric. This is where I think the future is. So maybe Kyle, give a few last words and then we can wrap.
Yeah. My general takeaway is that these principles that we hold dear to ourselves, they don't scale to broader society. Um, they don't deliver the value to the broader society in such a way that it has a meaningful impact on everybody's life. And I think this is kind of one of the major takeaways that I had going into this event, and that I kind of confirmed through conversations with others, is that like we can hold these values to be dear and true to us, but if we want to have an impact, it's got to deliver real value to another person who doesn't care about these things. Um, Unless we're expecting everybody encounters the same problem that brought us to the space in the first place. And that they decide that our solution is the best solution to solve their problem on behalf of themselves. But in the same way that I say that not everybody wants to run their own email server, I don't think everybody wants to run their own hardware. I don't think everybody wants to manage their own keys. I don't think everybody wants to manage their own content moderation. I think, as I like to say, I want somebody else to take that ability on my behalf. And if I need to, I want to be able to take it back. That's the only thing that I care about, is that 1% when I need to, that I have that ability to do so.
Yeah. I think we all agree on that. All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you so much, Kyle, for your time. And we'll be putting up this hot take for now. It's only available for DIF members the next couple of weeks until we get it on our YouTube channel. So, yeah, awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Hello, old friends who are watching.